Hello my friends, this is a short tutorial on how to create a composition within After Effects. We've talked about a couple of different things already. We've talked about opening the program, we've talked about importing footage into After Effects. So I've already got the program open here on my desktop, which you can see. I'm going to go ahead and go through the process of importing some footage here, or some files here, so that we can work with them. And in the process of doing that, I'll show you guys a couple of different ways to create a composition. So within my project window here, don't forget, as you click in the different areas, you can highlight the different sections of the interface. You'll see this little highlight line color show up around the outside of it. This will affect some of the things in the pull down menu, so just be aware of that. So in the project window, I'm just going to double click. I double click using the left or the standard mouse button. I'm going to go to where I have some files here that are already ready for us, and that's going to be, I've got a folder here called creating a composition. So I've got some stuff. We're going to go ahead and do it one of the ways that we've already shown you, just to make sure everybody is aware of how this works. I have the same Photoshop file that I showed in the last exercise. So I'm going to take a look at this. This is a Photoshop file. It is a layered Photoshop file. As I look down here at the bottom for my settings, it knows it's a PSD file. Import as, I'm going to show you what happens if I don't do this the proper way. If I import as footage, I click that, I click open, I do that, it comes in just like that. It will recognize all of the individual layers here, but we've got a little bit of a problem, and that is the fact that, as I mentioned before, this horizontal thing right here is supposed to be a conveyor belt. So if I click it and move it around, you can see it actually ends. And when I created this, it was much, much longer. It continued all the way over here outside of the composition. So I'm going to back up. I'm going to get that out of there. I'm going to double click again, and I'm going to choose that file one more time. And instead of footage and composition kind of do the same thing on that particular file type, but I'm going to switch over to composition and retain layer sizes and bring it in this time. And again, I've got to confirm, yes, editable layer styles, just like I did the last couple of times. So now I've got my composition here, and you know, based on what we've talked about before, in the project window, you're going to have multiple types of things over here. You're going to have images, you're going to have sound files, you'll have PSD files, you'll have Illustrator files. Whatever you're working with, those are all going to show up here. But in addition to that, you can create folders to keep things organized, but you also have something that's really important, and that's a composition. The composition looks like this. Looks like a little film strip with 3 little geometric shapes and RGB in there. For the composition, the way that we brought this in, we also end up with individual files inside a folder that are all those different parts of that composition. So double clicking it opens it over here, and this is the cool thing, because now if I select the belt, because I chose retain layer sizes, it actually shows me all of this extra part over here. So as I click that and start moving it through, look at that, I've got all of that extra space that I can work with that item. So that's really helpful to me. That is one way to create a composition. You know, you would have to create your assets in Illustrator or Photoshop in the correct size to make that work that way. So let's go ahead and do things in a slightly different way here. So again, I'm going to import some footage. I'm just going to go get a folder called Tour the Interface. I'm going to bring that entire folder in. There's a bunch of stuff in there. So I'm going to click open. So when I do that, I get a folder here. Everything is organized. I can see all of those different parts. I've got a sound file. I've got an image right there. I've got another sound file, and I've got a little picture of like a little Android robot. So one quick, easy way to make a new composition. This will make the composition the exact size of the file that you're working with. In this case, I've got this background called grass and sky. So if I take that file right there and I drag it down and I drop it on the composition icon at the bottom of the project window, it will create a composition based on that file and make it exactly that size. So my composition is fine. It's really kind of like a little bit of an older format here. It's a 4:3 like old-fashioned TVs. If I want to see something about or see the settings for my composition, I can go up here to the top to my composition pull down menu. I can choose composition settings, and I can actually see how big this comp is. So this comp is 720 pixels wide by 520 pixels tall. It's called grass and sky because it pulled that name from the Photoshop file there. The frame rate's 2997. This is pretty standard for video in North America. My duration is important. This is something that's going to default to whatever you did last. So depending on how long the animation is that you want to work with, then you're going to have to possibly come down here and edit this. So if I didn't want a 5-second animation and I wanted a 10-second animation, I'd have to edit that, change it to 10 seconds, click OK. Then weird things happen down here. This little bar at the top of my timeline, it's only showing me half of it. This is actually kind of almost like a magnifier or a zoom in on my timeline. So to see the whole thing, if I grab that little blue dot and I pull it to the right, and then I'm going to notice that background that I just created, it only goes to the halfway mark. So if I grab my playhead and scrub across, oops, once I get past it, I can't see it anymore. So what I'd have to do is select that, click on the end of it, drag it all the way over to the right to the end, and now I can realign that. Anytime you work with changing your composition settings, you may have to deal with that depending on whether you made it longer or shorter. So another way to create a composition, I'm just going to use these same assets at this point, would be to come to the bottom of the project window. You've got 3 different little switches down here plus a trash can. So if I just click the create a new composition, then I get this composition settings dialog box. So I could just call this new comp. And for my presets here, this is one that we're going to use for pretty much everything that we do. Just get familiar with this one. As I click on my preset right there, if you look down here, it's after these, you've got these little gray breaks in here that kind of break up the different formats. We're looking for this one. It's called HDV HDTV 720 29.97. That's what we're going to use for the vast majority of what we do within this class. So I'm going to click that number right there. That will set my composition up for me. It applies those dimensions 1280 by 720. It applies the frame rate 29.97. My resolution is full. My duration is 10 seconds. Let's say in this particular instance, I really only want it to be 5 seconds. So I can edit that and make that 5 seconds. I can put in a background color. It's really not important here. So I'm going to click OK. So now I have a brand new composition. And we haven't really gotten to this part yet, but I've got a brand spanking new comp here, and if I wanted to put something in that comp, I could grab that same image and I could drag it over and I could just drop it inside that composition. Now just keep in mind that the comp that I created is larger than this image, so I may have to scale this up to make it work based on what I'm doing, just like that. So just know that you do have the ability to do stuff like that as well. So one last thing here I was going to show you guys. Let's go ahead and bring in one more thing. And I've got one more folder here. I've got the Elroy Jetson folder. And very similar to what we were doing before, just to kind of run through that one more time. I've got several things here. I've got my little Elroy. I've got some sound, and then I've got a background. There we go. So if I take that background and I drag that down and drop it on the new comp window, on the new comp icon, I get a brand spanking new comp. Let's see how big that comp is. Let's go under composition. Let's go to composition settings. It's called the Jetsons background. Well, of course it is, because there's the file that it's based on. It is 1280 by 720 because I made it that size, and it's 5 seconds long. So all that's good.